Well, good morning, everyone. Seems like this is picking me up. Well, okay, great. So we survived our first real snowfall of the season. I don't know how much you all got. We got 14 centimeters in Waterloo. Yeah, it's pretty healthy. Yeah, what can I say, especially for that part in the November. Now you can hardly tell, right? I think it's all gone. So what do you know? It will be back. So we can look forward to that. I want to talk this morning about something that I wrote about in the Guiding Light not that long ago, but I haven't actually talked about it at any of the temples. And I want to expand on what I said there because in the Guiding Light, the Toronto Temple newsletter, you have just a very limited amount of space. So you can't really say everything you want to say on a topic in an article for that. So I wanted to kind of expand on that there. So even if you happen to have read that, and this seems a little familiar, there'll be more this morning. It's about something that's in Venice, California, where my aunt actually lives, which is part of Los Angeles. Some people may know Venice. Like Venice in Italy, which is named after, they used to have canals there, but I think they filled them all in at this point, but the name endures. Venice is known for being kind of a funky neighborhood with a lot of artists. It's pretty interesting, a little cheaper, at least back in the day, than some of the places used to be. And my aunt, in fact, is an artist of sorts, works in the film industry, does sets and costumes and this sort of stuff. So that's an artistic sort of thing. So not surprised to find her living in Venice there, where I visit her sometimes. There's another artist who lives in Venice, many artists, but one in particular. His name is Patrick Johnston. And he's the person I want to talk about this morning. He's an interesting person whose specialty is ceramics. So unlike my aunt, who does costumes and sets and this sort of stuff, he works in clay. That's his medium, is clay. He's doing ceramics. And he's got a studio there in Venice, which he calls the Temple of Meditation instead of Temple of Meditation. So, kind of a pun. I'm not sure it's a good one, but it's kind of amusing. It makes me kind of chuckle every time I say it. So, Temple of Meditation. So already you can tell that he's thinking of his work as like a sort of a sacred kind of art that he's doing, right? He's calling it a temple. This is his work studio. And what sort of temple is it? A temple of meditation. So, like already this is kind of got a Buddhist spirit to it that he's there with, right? Working with this clay. And he in fact has a little altar there in the Temple of Meditation. And he's got some incense there, sticks there, and some special items, including like a clay figure in meditation pose that he's put there. That said, I'm not sure that he's really a Buddhist because above the altar, he's got an image hanging there, and it's Clint Eastwood. It's a still from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He's got a couple big guns there and everything. So he's got this nice peaceful altar, and then if you look up, where you might have usually a Buddha statue or image is Clint Eastwood. So he's a unique person. What can I say? So, anyways, there at the Temple of Meditation, he's working in ceramics, and his specialties particularly is clay pots. So you can make a lot of things out of clay, but it's pots in particular, vases actually, that he's making that are sort of his specialty. And he creates these in a very special way. And this is what really caught my attention, even more than Clint Eastwood at the altar, this sort of thing. So a while back, one day in 2004, actually, he was making one of his pots. And in doing so, he accidentally kind of like, I guess, stumbled or something, and he hugged it. And when he did so, he kind of smushed it, as you might think. This is wet clay. He's got the wheel there, potter's wheel, and it's gone around. He's shaped it, everything, and then for some reason he ended up kind of hugging it by accident. But he smushed it. But he was kind of interested in the results of that accident there. He thought, okay, that's kind of funky looking. That's different than any pot I've made before. I've made all these perfect pots, but now I've made this distinctive, imperfect, but interesting pot. So he started experimenting with this. He started making larger pots, maybe about this big or so, pretty big, and then hugging them on purpose. So while they were still wet, he would actually put his arms around it and, pull it in and for an embrace and hug it there, right? I don't know how much we know about ceramics and pottery processes, but you don't normally hug your wet clay pot and smush it. This is unique, right? He found this practice, though, really meaningful, surprisingly. This person, Patrick Johnson, he'd actually grown up in a very cold family, and he couldn't recall even a single time that his father had ever hugged him at any age at all. And so he was unexpectedly sort of affected by this hugging practice. And he kind of felt like in hugging these pots, in sort of making hugs, therefore, he was putting something good back into the world because, he developed an actual technique. He didn't just hug the pot and then like go home. Like he would hug the pot, and then as part of the process, then he would kind of look at it, and if he thought that this was a really good looking, hug that was interesting, that was embedded into the clay there, then he would glaze it, and he would put it into the kiln and fire it, and then it would become permanent as a now a hardened, permanent pot of this shape with this hug, shaped into it in that way. And then, I guess he would sell them because he is, you got to pay for the temple of meditation somehow. So, he's producing these things, right? And so, when I learned about this, I thought, oh, there's something really interesting about this, because from an objective point of view, these are aesthetically imperfect pots, right? Instead of being round all the way around and everything, they got, kind of there's places where they're indented. And of course, if you're smushing in, then other parts are kind of bulging out in this sort of thing. So they're kind of funky looking in this way. But they're very compelling, actually. They in some ways, like you've seen a million regular pots, but every one of these hugged pots is going to be a little different from every other hugged pot even, right? Because you're never going to hug it exactly the same way. So I actually thought it was kind of beautiful looking to see these very interesting, distinctive pots. Eventually, though, he decided to go beyond just making his hug pots. He opened up his studio. He opened up the temple to other people and began allowing them to come in and to hug a pot together. So he would specifically have couples come in, so that it went from just him solo hugging a pot to couples doing sort of a team, couple hugging around a pot. So they would come in, and he'd have a large wet pot ready to go, looks all perfect, and then they're going to smush it because they both hug from around it. One person this way, the other person that way. So they're hugging each other, but they're hugging each other around the pot there, right? And so this imprints their bodies and the shape of their love into the clay itself, right? And when they're done hugging, they step back and they see this unique shape that embrace has created, all right? And it has all the specific indentations where their arms and their bodies, maybe even their cheeks were against this pot. And of course, every one of these pots is going to be unique just to that couple, because every other couple that comes in and hugs a pot, they're going to be different. They're different sizes than the other people. They're, different shapes. They hug this way, they hug that way. Like they're never going to be the same. So each one is unique to just themselves in this way. And then of course, Johnson will fire the pot and paint it. And then it becomes a sort of special, one of a kind, sort of like large flower vase that the couple can take home later on when it's ready. So I thought, well, this is a really unique kind of art that he's doing. And I watched all sorts of videos of this process, and they were really kind of moving, because every time that a couple would come into the studio, into the temple there, and they would hug their wet pot, they would always inevitably, they would give a big smile, when they did this. And usually they couldn't help kind of leaning in for a kiss. It was just kind of, they're hugging together on this thing. And, it's sort of sweet, and it's sort of ridiculous. And, they're doing this thing, and they can't help just being kind of happy. And, it's kind of a special moment. And they had young couples, they had old couples. They even had like pregnant women with big belly smushed up against the pot, and the partners are hugging them on the other side and this sort of thing. So they're really kind of cool videos. And one story that I read about one of these couples, this woman named Rosie, who's a friend of Johnston, and her husband Jeremy was diagnosed with a rare, rapidly spreading cancer. They were only in their early 40s, so this was kind of a shock to them. They weren't prepared for that. And chemotherapy worked at first for Jeremy, but then it became obvious that he was not going to beat it, unfortunately. So right near the very end of his lifetime, Rosie and Jeremy came into the Temple of Medication in order to hug a pot. You know, they were invited to come in by Johnston, and they were hugging and kissing around the pot and everything. And then it was over, and they took one last trip to see family for the last time. And he passed away within a few days of coming into the studio. And of course, Rosie was very upset. They'd been together for 20 years, and this was really devastating. And, she didn't really know what to do with herself. She lost her husband well before this was happening to her peers. We reach a stage in life where this is something common, that we're kind of going together as a cohort, but this is earlier and no one else was struggling with this. And so she didn't really know how to handle this well. People didn't know how to comfort her. She started kind of isolating herself. People started drifting away. And so everything was kind of falling apart in this way. And 6 months went by, the pot was ready, but she was reluctant to come in and pick up this pot because it reminded her too much of when she still had her husband, Jeremy, with her and this sort of thing. But she decided, okay, I have to do it. So she came in and got it. And when she came into the Temple of Medication and got the pot, she was sort of surprised by her reaction to it. And she started crying as soon as she touched it. And when she put her arms around it, it had the exact indentations where her body and where Jeremy's body, her husband, had been. So it fit her perfectly, right? And it recreated the shape of his own arms when they were hugging her that last time. So even though he was gone, still there was this sort of perfect trace of the impression that he had made in the world that was still remaining and was still available to her. And so she took it home, and it was really meaningful to her because every time she picked up the pot or hugged the pot, or even put flowers into it because she's using it as a vase, it was like Jeremy was hugging her again. So even when the vase was just sort of sitting there, with flowers and something, it still was a constant reminder of how he had changed, the world, how he had been present, and how he continued to exert a loving presence in her life even afterwards. So I was really moved by hearing about this. And this raises the question, okay, why am I bringing up clay pots in a Dharma talk? I've had to listen to a whole spiel about this guy who, don't worry, I'm not marketing his pots or something like that. It's not where we're going with this. When I was learning about all this, I couldn't help but be struck by what seemed like the Dharma lessons that were part of these hugging pots as I heard about it. So, Johnston invites people to come into the studio, and anyone can come in there and hug a pot at the Temple of Medication. And because he's in Los Angeles, there's a lot of celebrities around. There really are. I saw them when I lived in Los Angeles, just going by on the street, this sort of stuff. There's lots of celebrities around. And so many of them, therefore, have come into the Temple of Medication in order to do their own hugging pots, this sort of thing, as well as many regular people. They have those in Los Angeles, too. So he's had all sorts of regular people, people of all ages, people of all ethnicities, people of every kind of income level. He's had same-sex couples and opposite-sex couples. Also, families sometimes have come in and done the hugging. So all sorts of people come in, and very famous people. As Johnson points out, the clay doesn't care whether you're famous or not, right? It doesn't care how much money you have. It doesn't care what you look like. It doesn't care what your gender is. The clay just simply accepts everyone just as they are, and it molds itself to support them as they're putting their arms around it. So after they've done that, then the clay continues to sort of immortalize and reflect back this encounter that they had. And when Johnson was pointing out how this clay is accepting everyone, no matter how rich and famous or how ordinary, how troubled, or whatever they may be, right? Immediately, this made me think about Amida Buddha. Because like the clay, Amida Buddha also accepts everyone just as they are. The Buddha doesn't ask whether we're rich or poor, whether we're famous or ordinary, male, female, any other option. Like the clay, Amida Buddha doesn't worry about whether we're good or whether we're bad. Amida Buddha accepts us and supports us because that's the nature of the Buddha. Just that the nature of the clay is to receive and reflect a hug from everyone. This is just in the nature of the clay. This is just in the nature of the Buddha. It's just how they are. So Amida Buddha, too, is constantly embracing us at all times. And when we say Namo Amida Butsu, this is one way that we're able to make that embrace visible. And then we sort of become aware of it. Just like when looking at the unique shape of one of these pots, we're reminded of the person and the embrace that it represents. All of us are interdependent with one another and with all living and all non-living things. This is a basic understanding of Buddhism. And every one of us makes a difference in the lives of everyone else. That difference may be large or small, depending on who we're talking about specifically, but everyone is impacted by everyone else in some way. Because of interdependence, none of us are fully separate. None of us are fully independent, fully alone beings. Rather, we interexist with one another and exist because of one another. And we interexist with everything and because of everything. Even when we feel like we're apart, the karmic impressions that we've made on each other, these continue like indentations in the wet clay, and they live on even past the point of death. So in this way, we ourselves are like Johnston's wet, unfinished pots there. We're like soft clay, formed from the elements of the earth, and our shapes that we take, that we think of as ourselves, these come about in part because of effects beyond ourselves. We're molded into the shapes that we have by the love and the care that we receive from friends and family, by the nature of the society that we happen to live in, by the living ecosystems in which we're embedded. And at the deepest level, we're molded also by the support of Amida Buddha, which is the power of compassionate liberation that operates in our lives to produce wisdom and produce emancipation, as we heard in the Sambutsuge this morning. Our own bodies and our hearts, these are visible signs of these forces that are always working to produce and to sustain us. Without the support of everything that seems like it's beyond us, but is actually deeply interconnected with us, we would not be able to exist. I was reminded of that also when I was looking at these pots, which represent how these people came together, supported each other, and then it continued on in the shape of this pot. Even after the embrace had stopped, it showed that actually that relationship continues. So when I saw the couples embracing those pots in the videos, immediately my heart began to glow. I was really pleased by this. And my head bent forward actually on its own. And before I even knew it was going to happen, suddenly I was smiling and saying, Namo Amida Butsu, which is kind of funny because I was like doing it at my phone where I was seeing these videos originally. So luckily no one else was around. I was in the kitchen when I did this. So seeing those loving couples embracing, I was really reminded of that love and compassion that embraces us always. And so that's why the Nembutsu just popped out to express that happiness that I was feeling in that moment. Now, you may not have a special hugging pot in your home, but the Nembutsu is something that is always with us. It's always available to show us where our loved ones and where the Buddha has made an indelible impression on our lives. And after any one of us is gone still, that love and support which we have provided and expressed throughout our lives, this is going to continue to nurture those whom you care about. So just like those visible signs of the pots there that continue to express that hug, even after the hug is no longer going on, this is something that also continues in our lives as well. So these are the reflections that I had upon viewing those videos about the Temple of Metaclation. Thanks very much for your patience and attention this morning. And why don't we end the Dharma talk just with the Genbutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. 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 Thank you very much, everyone.